What happens when you try to rest? Does it feel replenishing or does it feel lazy? Do you feel the constant need to be productive to get your work list, your to-do list done? Do you feel the constant need to be productive or to get your to-do list done? Keep listening. It's about to get real. Hey, everyone. Welcome to episode number 80 of the Physician and Philosopher podcast, where we take an uncurated and unapologetic look into physician life, money, and mindset. So today's thought is this: when I have a successful and productive day, I have earned my rest. So after having a certain book recommended to me about 1,000 times, I'm exaggerating a little bit of hyperbole there. It's actually more like 20 times. I finally started listening to the audiobook version of The Gap and the Gain, which is written by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. And I'm going to be honest, I see why people have recommended this book to me for a while. So I kind of have had a tendency traditionally to live in what they would call the gap, or in looking at where I am versus where I want to be. And that kind of leads to a feeling that I'm not doing enough. And this kind of plays into the arrival fallacy that we often discuss on this show, right? This idea that once you get there, there is no there, like you're not as happy as you think you'll be. And part of the reason why is because it's a little bit like the horizon, where it's off in the distance and you work to try to get there. But when you get to that point, like there's always another horizon off in the distance. And so this forward focus on where you want to be compared to where you are is called the gap. You're living in the gap of where you are versus where you want to be. And historically, I've kind of been the embodiment of the Epictetus quote, like nothing is enough for the man to whom enough is too little. And that is now coming to a close. I refuse at this point to live in the gap without working on living more in the gain. So don't get me wrong. Living in the gap has actually had some benefits. It's made me crazy productive. In the last 5 years, I've probably made over 200 podcast episodes, like 500 blog posts. I've written a couple of books, spoken publicly at a variety of institutions across the country. And part of the reason is because I've never-ending need to produce in order to achieve some ideal in the future, that horizon that's off in the distance, right? I'm trying to get to that goal. And I've been trying to do this to somehow earn my worth or my value, that when I tell myself I'm being productive, I am somehow now good enough, right? So said differently, if I tell myself at the end of the day that, I've been productive, then I can feel like I earn the rest that I want or reward myself for that hard work I've done. Yet when we have this kind of gap mindset, there's always more to produce, right? There's always something to do. There's always another podcast episode. We put one out each week. There's always another book to write. There's always another talk to give, another lecture to create. And so in their book, Hardy and Sullivan kind of encourage people to shift to what they call the gain mindset. So like gain, like as in the washing, the detergent. And the gain is looking back on where you are now compared to where you were. So where were you 90 days ago, 6 months ago, 6 years ago? And looking at today, how much have you accomplished? What have you gained? How is life different? And with this sort of focus, it very easily and kind of immediately shifts your mindset into one of gratitude and gratefulness. And it's also helped me make sense of kind of the last 10 months of my life too. So as some of you know, in July of 2021, I went to 2 days a week in anesthesia. So I work Thursdays and Fridays right now. And in May, I'm actually going back to work one more day per week. So I'm going to go back doing 3 days a week and doing academic anesthesiology. In addition to that, I actually gave up my flexibility too. So now when they schedule me, they can schedule me on any day of the week. I just need to have 2 weekdays off in order to run my business. And when I tell people this, and I followed up with the natural question is like, oh, is the physician philosopher not doing well? Like, do you have to go to work because you need the money? And that's actually not the situation. The physician philosopher is doing fine. They think I've lost my marbles. They're like, Jamie, are you really going back to work more in medicine? Like, what's wrong with you? Medicine is so broken. If I could choose to leave medicine, I totally would. And I have to be honest, like truthfully, life's a journey. What I want right now may be different than what I want in 6 months or in 6 years. And I'll be a different person in 6 months or in 6 years, because if we don't learn from the lessons that life teaches us and we don't change and become someone new, what's the point, right? And, after defeating my burnout, I honestly fell back in love with my job. I love practicing anesthesia. I love teaching my residents and fellows. I love being around the people I work with at the hospital. And this is what happens when we're exposed to thought work and to coaching. And it happened to me, and it happens to our clients all of the time inside of ACE. They fall back in love with their job. And usually when people come on for a consult, they're like, yeah, I'm really wanting to change this, change that. And I always tell people like, hey, I hate to tell you this because it's not what you want to hear right now because you're thinking about changing jobs, going part-time, leaving medicine because you're burned out. But when you're considering that transition, what happens to most of our clients is they come inside, they learn the skills to actually love their job again. And then from a position of strength, decide whether they want to stay or not, knowing that they can if they want to, and deciding to leave if they feel it's best for them. But they're no longer running away from the job. They're not running from a scarcity mindset where they want to run away from this thing that's so terrible. And that's what happened to me. I was burned out. I wanted to leave my job. I was actually really upset and felt undervalued and unappreciated, unheard. And I fell back in love with my job. And so I'm going back to working it more now that I actually really enjoy it. So for me, so long as the hospital continues to allow me to have the balance I need to run this business, to run the Physician Philosopher, I'm down with going back to work more. And I've learned to love it again, even though the culture of medicine is broken and there's a lot of work that we have to do, even at the hospital where I work. So the reason I bring this up is that I've noticed something over these last 10 months about myself and about other doctors while reading this book and, having this moment of inspiration. Many of us are like just workaholics. We are addicted to productivity. In fact, many of us use productivity to buffer things that we don't want to deal with, whether that's boredom or anxiety at home or the stress that comes along with like having something that's left undone. Many of us are productive because we are unwilling to feel those feelings. There's this constant need to produce, to accomplish, to do more. And really the reason behind this, in addition to the buffering, is that many doctors define their worth, their value, based on how productive they are. Many doctors feel that they need to produce in order to tell themselves that they're being successful, that they are worthy, that they are enough. And even when many doctors are offered the chance to rest, they find themselves kind of shutting themselves into shame about how they could use that time to be productive or cover the hospital or do whatever they want to. We talk about this in episode 21 on choosing curiosity over shame, and also in episode 55 on the therapeutic index of physician thought work, like how we view thought work in our life. And I actually had a recent, chat with somebody who told me that they hadn't had vacation in 7 years. And part of the reason why is because they're the sole physician at their hospital in their specialty covering their shifts. And this idea of rest and taking time away, like, how can I do that? And if I do that, like who's going to cover the hospital? And shouldn't I be doing that? If I don't do that, then no one else can. And so we shoot ourselves into shame. And that's what causes this internal narrative that we tell ourselves that we're doing the opposite of what we should or shouldn't be doing. And when we do that, that's when shame sneaks in. And we have this like total shame suck fest that ruins a good day. You feel bad because you quote unquote should be doing something else, right? And that's what many doctors do when they're given the opportunity to have some time off. They feel like they should be finishing up their charting or answering their emails or working on that one project at home or at work. And so in this episode, I'm going to talk about how I've rewired that and, in terms of what a successful day looks like to me, what it means to be productive, how I've learned to be in the moment, and how this new definition of success allows me to feel like I've earned my rest at the end of the day, which means that I can actually enjoy that rest. This has been a long time coming. I've been wanting to make this episode for a while, but I hadn't really wrapped my head around it all. So I hope that it'll be, really helpful for you. So starting out, like just this idea of rest versus laziness. For many of us, many busy doctors, we have a hard time resting. And one of the reasons why is because we have that ever-growing to-do list. And when we try to rest, we have a hard time because we're so focused on all of the other tasks that we need to get done, like the charting, the emails, the projects, and the things on the home repair list, that it becomes challenging, right? And more importantly, we tell ourselves that we aren't working when we aren't working on this list. It means we are being lazy. And so what should be rest feels like laziness because there's this to-do list that's not getting done. And when it's not getting done, it causes anxiety and stress. And sort of, man, I'm being lazy right now. I should be working on X, Y, or Z instead of just enjoying the rest. And the reason this often happens is because we have created this narrative that rest itself is not productive. I'm going to stop and say that again. So many of us believe that rest is not productive. And with this kind of view, when we aren't working on the to-do list, we are therefore being lazy. We're not being productive. And to be honest, this has been my narrative for a really long time. It's been really hard for me to rest. And yeah, I want to push back on this a little bit. Is that really true? Like when we aren't working on the list, are we really being lazy? When we aren't working on that list of things to do, is it really counterproductive? No, of course it's not. And think about it. We all know that when we truly rest, we actually get rejuvenated and energized to do even better work. If we take this concept to a full extreme, we know this is true. When we get full 8 hours of sleep, we're better able to attack the next day. And on the other end of the spectrum, if we don't get any sleep after a 24 or 30-hour call when we haven't slept at all, eventually you can't work at all. So we know that we need rest. It's good for us. In addition to this, if we're being honest, our moments of inspiration also come from rest. So not only is it rejuvenating and allows us to attack the next day, but it's those moments that when we are resting that produce inspiration in our life. If you don't take the time to think about where you're going and what your life is doing and where your next destination is going to be 5 months, 5 years, 50 years down the road, how can you possibly get there if you don't create that time to rest and to think about those things, right? That's why vacation is so important. That's why listening to music for me is so important. Like I love a good Ben Rector song, a ton of inspiration from that, right? Reading a good book. Like we're currently doing this episode right now. Like the inspiration from this episode came from 2 books that I'm reading, The Gap and the Gain, and I'm reading another one called Winning the War in Your Mind. And so, or having a good conversation with a friend, right? Like all of those things come when we're resting. Those moments of inspiration, right, that come from rest. These are the moments that life is made of, and it's the good stuff. It's the moments that inspire us to see that we are meant for so much more than just being productive, workaholic machines. It's about living your best life, living an abundant life, which means enjoying the relationships that have been placed in your life and enjoying the good things we have already accomplished and choosing to focus on what we have instead of what we want, on what we get to do instead of what we have to do. And so now, I will be the first to admit, just to normalize this, that I'm still working on this. I'm still working to redefine rest, but I'm getting better each day. And I want to share a couple of ways that I've really learned how to do that, to redefine rest and productivity so that I can truly rest. And the first is, learning the process of refocusing my attention. So I talk about this a lot with our clients in ACE, but, there's a process of meditation called noting. There's a kind of a concept, a principle, a way of meditating called noting where you're asked to focus on your breathing, and the person instructing you knows that you're going to get distracted because you're human. And when you do get distracted, they want you to note it. Is it like, did you get distracted by a thought or a feeling? Like, were you itching on your leg? That's a feeling. Or did you get distracted by, oh yeah, gosh, I need to make sure that I pack the kids, waters for their lunch tomorrow. That's a thought, right? And when we do that, when we get super meta about it, we're actually the watcher of our thoughts. We've talked about this on the show before, but we're the watcher of our thoughts. And when we do that, we can actually bring our attention back from that distracted thought or feeling back to our breathing. And as you practice that skill, it actually becomes something that you can build, that you can hone, that you can work on and improve. And it works the same way with refocusing our attention. So, for example, when I'm in a conversation with one of my kids, and I'm talking with them about something that's important to them. Like Grace just had this relay race the other day, and she's super excited about it. Like they had this race off, and she ended up getting second place, and so she made this relay team, and so she was really excited about it. And in the middle of that conversation, I might be like, shoot, I forgot to download that episode I just recorded for the Philosopher podcast. Like I can't, we can't get it up on, the interwebs up, so that you can listen to it right now in your ears. And traditionally, when this has happened, I used to drop what I was doing, like that conversation with Grace, and go hammer out what I'd left undone, because until I get that done, I can't rest. And now what I do, like noting during meditation, I refocus my attention back on Grace, back on that conversation with her about her relay race. And as I do that, I'm going to get distracted. Your mind is going to wander. You're human. That's normal. So instead of beating yourself up, instead of shooting yourself into shame and saying, I shouldn't be getting distracted during these conversations, I should be focused on my daughter. No, instead I say, I caught it. I did it. And I refocus my attention back on that conversation with Grace. And as I do that and I practice it and I get better and better and better, what it allows me to do, the end result of that work is that I'm now able to be more present in the moment. With each passing day as I work on this skill, I'm able to be more present in the moment. And there's loads of psychological literature that talk about, hey, you want to be happy in life? Learn how to be present. So with repetition, I can work on that skill, I can build it, and like the process of noting during meditation, we can learn how to be more present in the moment with practice. So that's the first thing that I've been working on. It's been extremely helpful for me, and that's something you can work on like right after you finish listening on this podcast. When you go have a conversation with somebody today, make eye contact with them. Listen to the words they're actually saying, right? And then when you get distracted by a thought of things that you have to do, just refocus your attention back on that person. And for, the first time it happens, you might be thinking about that thing to do for like 2 or 3 minutes before you realize, oh gosh, I haven't been listening. As you build that skill set, it will become easier and easier to do that. So the second thing is refocusing my attention. It is not the only thing I've been doing. So I've also been doing a lot of work on redefining productivity itself. So I've been working on my attention. I've also been working on redefining productivity. And in part, this kind of came from that book that I mentioned, The Gap and the Gain. So shifting my focus onto what I consider a win or a gain has helped me realize that I get to choose what it means to have a productive or successful day. So if the gap is looking forward on, where I am versus where I want to be, which you can never get to that ideal, it's that constantly moving horizon. The gain is a backward look on what I've accomplished, what I've already done, how much I've already grown, the things that I can do today that I couldn't do, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 90 days ago. And you can actually train the skill to be a daily thing. I get to define my wins. When I look back at the day, when I lay my head to sleep, close my eyes, I get to define what my wins were. I get to define what my gains were, what I did well that day. So in turn, this has kind of led me to create 5 rules for a successful day. Now, these 5 rules were very specific to me, and they're intentionally decided, and then I can look back on them at the end of the day and say, hey, look, I had a productive day. Now I can rest. And I can wait for tomorrow, right? In turn, this allows me to tell myself that the day was, in fact, complete. It was successful. It was productive. Now, knowing me, you're probably listening to this and you're like, all right, I got an idea what Jimmy's going to say, like 5 rules for a successful day. They include like creating a podcast and writing a book or holding meetings for my business or coaching my face off. Yeah, that's not at all what I decided on, right? Because I get to decide what a win is. I get to decide what a gain is. And my hell yes policy is getting clearer and clearer by the day. The things in my life that I want to say hell yes to right now include my wife, Kristin, my 3 kids, myself. I want to say yes to myself and the physician philosopher. And so if you're curious what my 5 rules are for a successful or productive day, like what I can look back and say that was a successful day because I did these 5 things. This is what it looks like. All right. So number 1, do something to make Kristin happy. When I do that, that is successful. That is a productive day. That is a day where I was intentionally doing what I want to be doing with my life. Right. Number 2, spending quality time with each of my kids. Number 3 is creating at least one thing. So I'm a creator. I love content creation. That's why you're listening to this podcast. Maybe it's more for me than it is for you. I love just creating content. Number 4 is move for at least 30 minutes per day. This is kind of an exercise thing. And then number 5 is do at least one thing that I enjoy for no other reason than that I want to enjoy it. And if you're looking at this list, it's a completely different framework than focusing solely on productivity in a traditional sense, isn't it? Right? It's not about that to-do list. Yet it's a complete and full day for me. When I think about my life's priorities, when I'm intentional about the kind of person I have been working to become and that I am becoming, this list pretty much perfectly encapsulates what a productive day, a successful day, a full, complete, abundant day looks like for me. And when I have a successful and productive day, then at the end of it, I can tell myself that I've earned my rest. It can't be laziness because I've been productive. I've been successful. I have reframed what that means to me. I've lived a full and meaningful day. And when I do that, I deserve rest. Now, the lesson to be learned here, right, is that success is in the eye of the beholder. So my wife, Kristin, her love language, right, there's a book about that, like the 5 love languages. Hers is acts of service. So when I do the dishes, laundry, I wash a vehicle, I make the bed, or I help the kids in a meaningful way, that makes Kristin feel loved. It makes her happy. Now, I do some of those things anyway, but when I'm intentional about it, and I know that Kristin can come home from work to a clean kitchen because I've done the dishes, I know she's going to notice, and I know she's going to feel loved, and I know it's going to make her happy, right? So that's success to me. That's productive. That is a meaningful, abundant action. Having quality time with my kids, that can look like a variety of things, right? So I've got a 5, 8, and now 11-year-old. And so if like Anna Ruth the other day, we were like coloring princess books on the ground in her bedroom. Like that's what we were doing. And before, I would be coloring that and thinking like, man, I need to get back downstairs and finish that one thing. And now I'm like, no, like this is a successful day. This is a win. This is a gain. This is what I want to be doing with my time. And when I'm doing this, this is a good thing. This is a win, right? It might mean having a good conversation with Grace, like the one I mentioned earlier. It could be going to my son's football practice and Grace's football practice. They both play flag football. And watching every snap without looking at my phone, right? That could be spending quality time with and supporting my kids. Creating one thing. That again, can be a variety of things. It could be a meaningful email. It could be a podcast episode like the one you're listening to right now. I spent, 2 hours today creating this thing. It could be creating a lecture or a book chapter. In the end, it doesn't really matter because my two favorite activities in this world are content creation and teaching. And it's taken me 5 years in entrepreneurship to really realize that. And that's why we're launching Medical Degree Financial University in June. Because I get to create courses and lectures, and I get to teach doctors in training how to create financial freedom so that they can live life on their terms, right? And that's all just to help people, which I love doing. And then I get to create content and teach, which are my two biggest passions in life. And so now I'm going to get to do that more often. And finally, working on myself has been really important too. So I've been doing this in terms of emotional work, thought work. I've been doing this in terms of spiritual work, really diving into scripture and trying to start my day each day in prayer and meditation and scripture. And it also includes physical, work. So I want to be someone who moves for at least 30 minutes per day. That's becoming part of my identity. And through that, I can create an identity that has a healthy lifestyle where fitness is naturally built in. So this can look different. It could be pickleball. It could be a walk with Kristin. It could be taking Piper, my dog, on a walk. It could be going for a run or lifting weights, like true exercise, in a traditional sense. It doesn't matter. The point is that these 5 things that are on my list, making Kristin happy, spending quality time with my kids, creating at least one thing, moving for at least 30 minutes per day, allows me to do this 5th thing, which is to do something I enjoy for the pure sake of enjoyment. Because when I do the above, I get to enjoy my rest. I get to tell myself that I'm doing something that I've earned. I get to rest because I've earned it, right? So when you think about what it means to be successful and productive for you, how are you currently defining that? What do you have to get done in order to truly enjoy your rest, to get those moments of inspiration and rejuvenation, to recharge and get your energy back? And if you don't like that current list, why not create a new one based on the intentional priorities you want in your life to reflect that are in your hell yes policy that you might be creating? And then with practice, make it perfect. So as we round out this show, I just want to ask you, how do you view rest and laziness in your life? When you try to rest, are you distracted? Do you view that as a moment of anxiety and stress because there's all this stuff to do? Or do you feel like you're being lazy, in other words? Or do you feel like it's rest, that moment of inspiration, and rest can be productive, and that good things come from rest? Are you allowing yourself to rest? And if you wrote down a list, the second question is this. If you wrote down a list of the 5 rules for you to know that you've had a successful, meaningful, or productive day, what would it look like if you did that intentionally? What if you didn't just go through the motions and run around putting fires out all day? What if you actually created 5 things you want to do each day that to you at the end of the day, you could lay your head on your pillow and ask yourself, what were my gains? What were my wins today? What went really well? What am I glad that I accomplished so that I can rest? So as you think about that, I encourage you to actually take a pen and paper, do those exercises, and really take it to heart because it's made a world's difference for me. So today's thought is this. When I have a successful or productive day, I have earned my rest. And what it means to be successful or productive is up to you. So until next time, my friends, start before you're ready. Start by starting. Start now. I will see you next week. Take care. Start before you're ready. Start by starting. Start now.